Hey there. Tonight we're going back, way back, to a time when screams echoed across blood-soaked battlefields, and the only thing standing between a soldier and death wasn't a modern hospital, but a man with a blade, some wine, and trembling hands. You are Marcus, a battlefield surgeon in ancient Rome, 104 BCE. The year means nothing to you. You don't count time that way. You count in bodies, in limbs, in the ones you saved, and the far more numerous ones you couldn't. Before we begin this journey through one of history's most brutal professions, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Are you ready to discover what they never taught you in history class? The raw, unglamorous truth about ancient medicine. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, pull those blankets a little tighter, because tonight you're not just learning history, you're living it. You're feeling the weight of a bronze saw in your hand. You're smelling the copper tang of blood mixed with battlefield dust. You're hearing the prayers of men who know their fate rests in your inexperienced hands. Let's begin. You wake before dawn in your tent, the canvas still heavy with last night's rain. The damp seeps into everything here at the northern frontier. Your blankets, your tunic, even your bones. You're 23 years old, though you feel ancient. Your hands are already stained with a brown residue that no amount of washing ever fully removes. It's blood, of course, always blood. Your name is Marcus, son of a physician who served 2 legions before fever took him in Gaul. You inherited his tools, a worn leather case containing bronze scalpels, hooks, forceps, and the dreaded saw. The saw terrifies you most. Not for what it does, but for how often you must use it. Outside, the camp stirs. 15,000 men preparing for another day of Rome's endless expansion. You're attached to the 10th Legion, camped along the Rhine, facing Germanic tribes who refuse to accept civilization. At least, that's what the generals say. You've stopped caring about politics. Your world has narrowed to flesh, bone, and the desperate attempt to keep men alive. You splash water on your face from a bronze basin. The water's cold, shocking. It helps you focus. In your medical texts, the precious scrolls you guard more carefully than gold, the great Hippocrates writes of humours and balance. But nothing in those elegant Greek words prepared you for the reality of battlefield medicine. Today will bring more wounded, it always does. You can feel it in the tension of the camp, the way centurions annoyed bark orders with extra edge to their voices. You eat breakfast with the other non-combatants, the engineers, the scribes, the quartermasters. The food is standard legionary fare, a thick porridge of wheat and barley, some hard cheese, yesterday's bread. You force it down, knowing you'll need the strength. The engineers discuss bridge construction. The scribes complain about requisition forms. No one asks you about your work. They never do. After eating, you make your rounds of yesterday's wounded. There are 12 men in the medical tent, a long structure that smells of sweat, infection, and the vinegar you use to clean wounds. The smell is overwhelming, thick enough to taste. You've learned to breathe through your mouth. The first man you check is Lucius, a 20-year veteran who took a spear through the thigh 2 days ago. You'd cleaned the wound, packed it with lint soaked in wine, and prayed to Asclepius. Now you unwrap the bandages carefully. The flesh around the wound is red, hot to the touch. Pus has begun to form. Your stomach sinks. You know what this means. "How does it look, Medicus?" Lucius asks, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. You lie. "Healing well, the heat is normal." It isn't. The wound is festering. In a day, maybe 2, the poison will spread through his blood. You'll have to take the leg, and even then, he'll probably die. But you don't tell him that. Not yet. Let him have hope while he can. The alarm sounds at midday. Not the regular signals, this is different. 3 sharp blasts followed by 2 long ones. Battle contact. Your heart accelerates immediately, though your hands remain steady. You've trained yourself for this response. Fear is natural. Panic is death. You begin preparations with mechanical efficiency born of too much practice. The medical tent must be ready. You direct the orderlies, boys too young to fight, but old enough to carry water and hold down screaming men, to prepare the tables. 2 long wooden boards on trestles. You spread clean linen over them. It won't stay clean long. You arrange your instruments in order of likely use. Forceps for arrows, hooks for probing, scalpels for cutting. The saw, always the saw at the end. You place bronze bowls for blood, knowing they'll overflow. Amphorae of wine, the precious wine that's worth more than gold when you're trying to clean contaminated flesh. The noise of battle grows louder. You can hear it now, even from here in the camp's interior. The clash of metal on metal, the roars of men trying to intimidate each other, to overcome their own terror. And underneath it all, the screams. Always the screams. Your assistant Gaius appears. He's 16, the son of a camp follower, learning medicine because he's too small for combat. His face is pale, but his jaw is set. "They're bringing the first casualties," he says. You nod. Prepare the cautery irons. The first wounded man arrives on a stretcher, carried by 2 of his comrades still splattered with enemy blood. He's conscious, which is bad. The unconscious ones don't scream. His name is Titus. You don't know his family name, his history, his dreams. You only know that a Germanic axe has opened his left arm from shoulder to elbow, and the white of bone gleams through the red mess of torn muscle. On the table, you command. Your voice is steady, authoritative. It has to be. These men need to believe you can save them. Titus is lifted onto the wooden surface. His armor has already been removed, leaving him in a blood-soaked tunic. His friends hold him down, one on each arm, another across his legs. There's no strapping men down here. Just pressure, just strength, just desperation. You examine the wound quickly. The bone isn't shattered, which is fortunate. The muscle is badly torn, but the major vessels seem intact. If you can clean this properly, stop the bleeding, and prevent festering, he might keep the arm. Might. Wine, you say to Gaius. He brings the amphora. You pour it directly into the wound. Titus screams. It's a sound that echoes off the tent walls, that makes your assistant flinch. You've heard this scream hundreds of times. It never gets easier. Hold him steady, you tell the friends. They tighten their grip. Their faces are grim. They know what comes next. You reach for your scalpel. You cut away the torn flesh that cannot be saved. This is the part they don't write about in the medical scrolls. Hippocrates speaks of preserving life, of doing no harm. But here, harm is necessary. You must remove damaged tissue before infection sets in. The line between necessary harm and destructive harm is razor thin, and you walk it with every cut. Titus has stopped screaming. Now he just groans. Deep animal sounds from his chest. His friends continue to hold him, though their grip slackens as exhaustion sets in. You work quickly. Speed is mercy. The longer this takes, the more he suffers. The blood flow is heavy but manageable. You can see the structures of the arm now. The muscles separated into their distinct groups. The tendons like rope. The bones scored but intact. You clean everything with more wine, picking out dirt and fragments of fabric that the axe drove deep into the flesh. Needle and thread, you say. Gaius hands you the curved bronze needle threaded with sinew. This is delicate work. You must bring the muscles back together in proper alignment, or Titus will never have full use of this arm again. Layer by layer, you suture. The muscle first, carefully matching the torn edges. Then the fascia. Finally, the skin. Your fingers move with practiced precision, each stitch placed exactly where it needs to be. This is craftsmanship. This is art. This is the only beauty you find in this ugly work. The suturing takes nearly an hour. By the time you're finished, 4 more wounded have arrived. They're lying on the floor, waiting their turn. 1 is unconscious. 2 are clutching wounds and moaning. The 4th is silent, staring at the tent ceiling with wide, unblinking eyes. Shock, probably, or he's already dying. You wrap Titus's arm in clean linen bandages, layering them carefully. Change these daily, you tell him. If the wound becomes hot, if red streaks appear, if pus develops, come to me immediately. He nods weakly. He's pale from blood loss, but his pulse is steady. He might survive this. It's the best you can hope for. His friends help him off the table. The linen is soaked red. You gesture to Gaius to replace it while you move to the next patient. There's no time for rest, no time to wash your hands thoroughly. You rinse them quickly in a bowl of wine water, knowing it's inadequate but having no choice. The next man has an arrow through his shoulder. The iron point has punched through leather armor, through skin, through muscle, and out the back. It's still there, the shaft protruding obscenely from both sides of his body. He's sitting upright, supported by a comrade, conscious but glazed with pain. You've removed hundreds of arrows. It never gets easier. The trick is reading the angle, understanding how the point is positioned inside the body. Pull wrong and you'll tear blood vessels, shred muscle, maybe nick a lung. You position yourself behind the arrow-wounded soldier. His name is Caius, and he's remarkably calm. Some men are like this. They accept their wound with stoic resignation, almost detached from their own body. It makes your work easier. I'm going to push it through, you tell him. It will hurt. Everything hurts, Medicus, he responds with grim humor. One more pain won't matter. You examine the exit wound on his back. The arrowhead has fully emerged, which is fortunate. You can grip it, control the extraction. If it were still inside, you'd have to push it the rest of the way through, and the serrated edges would cause massive damage. You grip the arrowhead firmly with bronze forceps. With your other hand, you brace against the man's back. On 3, 1, you pull hard. Not on 3. You've learned that waiting makes it worse. The arrow slides through with a wet, tearing sound. Blood immediately wells from both wounds. Caius grunts but doesn't scream. A tough one. You pack both wounds with lint soaked in wine. The ancient texts recommend honey, myrrh, various exotic substances. You use what you have: wine, vinegar, and prayers. Mostly wine. It seems to help prevent the festering, though you don't understand why. The wine burns away bad humors, perhaps. Or maybe the gods simply favor those who make offerings of their finest vintage. The wounded keep coming. By mid-afternoon, you've treated 17 men. Your back aches from bending over the table. Your hands are cramping. Your tunic is stiff with dried blood. The medical tent smells like a slaughterhouse. An officer enters, a centurion named Quintus, recognizable by his transverse crest. He has a deep gash across his ribs, cutting through the leather teruges of his armor. He's bleeding heavily, but walking on his own power. Officers rarely show pain. Medicus, he nods curtly. On the table, centurion. He complies, lying back without assistance. You cut away the damaged armor and tunic, exposing the wound. It's long, but not deep. The ribs deflected the blade. Still, it needs cleaning and closing. You work efficiently, having found a rhythm now. Clean, assess, repair, bandage. Clean, assess, repair, bandage. A mantra of survival. How goes the battle, you ask, making conversation to distract him as you pour wine over the wound. He hisses through his teeth but answers steadily. We hold the line. The Germans fight like madmen, but they lack discipline. Our formations will break them by nightfall. You nod, threading your needle. You've heard variations of this speech after every battle. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. Either way, you'll have wounded to tend. Will I fight again today? Quintus asks. You consider lying, but decide against it. Officers appreciate honesty. Not today. Maybe tomorrow, if there's no fever. As evening approaches, the flow of casualties slows. The battle has ended, apparently in Rome's favor, though you measure victory differently than the generals. Your victory is measured in men who walk out of your tent. Your defeat is measured in the ones who don't. A boy arrives. He can't be more than 15, though he's wearing legionary armor. His face is grey with shock. He's holding his right hand with his left, and even before you see the injury, you know what you'll find. The fingers are mangled, crushed by a mace or warhammer. Bones jut through skin at impossible angles. This is the injury you dread most. With a leg or arm wound, you have options. But hands. Hands are tools, identity, livelihood. A farmer without hands cannot farm. A soldier without hands cannot fight. A man without hands is reduced to begging. You examine the damage carefully. The thumb and first two fingers might be salvageable. The last two are beyond repair. The bones are pulverized, the flesh macerated. If you leave them, infection will spread to the whole hand, then up the arm. I have to remove these two fingers, you tell him gently. His eyes widen. No, please. I need my hand. I need all of it. This is the conversation you hate most. If I leave them, the wound will fester. The poison will spread. You'll lose the entire hand, possibly the arm, possibly your life. The boy, his name is Felix, ironically meaning lucky, eventually nods his acceptance. What choice does he have? You prepare your instruments with heavy heart. Amputating fingers is technically simpler than removing limbs, but psychologically more difficult. Everyone can see a missing finger. It's a permanent, visible marker of this day. You position Felix's hand on a small wooden block, palm down, the damaged fingers extended. Gaius brings leather strips. Bite down on this, you tell Felix, offering him a folded piece of leather. He takes it between his teeth, his jaw already clenched. You work quickly. The scalpel cuts through skin and remaining flesh easily. The bone is harder. You use small bone nippers designed for exactly this purpose. They crack through the shattered bone with sounds that make even you wince. Felix's muffled screams vibrate through the leather. His whole body goes rigid with pain. 2 quick cuts, 2 small bones removed. You cauterize the stumps with the hot iron, sealing blood vessels. The smell of burning flesh fills the tent. It's a smell you've never grown accustomed to, though you've caused it hundreds of times. It's the smell of survival, purchased at the cost of wholeness. You wrap the hand carefully, leaving the remaining fingers free. Keep it elevated, you instruct. Move the other fingers regularly so they don't stiffen. Felix nods, unable to speak, tears streaming down his face. Not from pain, from loss. Night falls. Oil lamps are lit throughout the medical tent, casting wavering shadows that make the wounded look like restless ghosts. You've been working for 14 hours straight. Your legs feel like stone, your hands ache. Your eyes burn from smoke and exhaustion. Gaius brings you bread and watered wine. You eat standing up, too tired to sit, too aware that more wounded might arrive. The bread tastes like ash. Everything tastes like ash after a day like this. You make rounds of the patients, now filling every available space in the tent. 23 men in various states of injury. Most are sleeping, exhausted by pain and blood loss. A few moan quietly. One is praying to Mars, promising sacrifices if he survives. You don't interrupt. Prayer harms no one, and who knows, perhaps the gods do listen. You check bandages, looking for signs of bleeding that hasn't stopped. You feel foreheads for fever. You adjust positions to ease pain. This is the other half of medicine, not the dramatic surgery, but the careful monitoring, the incremental adjustments that mean the difference between healing and infection. Lucius, the spear wound from this morning, is worse. His fever has spiked. The flesh around his wound is hot and swollen. Red streaks are climbing his thigh, the poison spreading through his blood. You know what must be done. Tomorrow you'll take his leg, and probably a few days after that, you'll bury him. But that's tomorrow's horror. Tonight you're too tired to think about it. You finally allow yourself to leave the medical tent near midnight. The camp is quiet now, sentries walking their rounds, most soldiers collapsed in exhausted sleep. The night air is cold and clean, shocking after the fetid atmosphere of the tent. You breathe deeply, trying to cleanse your lungs. You walk to the river that runs past the camp. It's forbidden to bathe at night, too dangerous, too exposed to potential attack. But you need to wash. You need to feel clean, even if only for a moment. You strip off your tunic, now stiff as leather with dried blood. You wade into the shockingly cold water up to your waist. The current tugs at you, strong and indifferent. You scrub at your skin, watching blood dissolve into the dark water, carried away downstream. You imagine it flowing all the way to the sea, dissipating into something so vast it becomes nothing. But you know the truth. The blood is in you now, as much as on you. You can wash your skin, but you can't wash your memories. The screams, the smell of burning flesh, the look in Felix's eyes when he understood what he'd lost. These things don't dissolve. They accumulate, layer upon layer, until you sometimes wonder if there's any of the original Marcus left under all the death. You eat nothing for breakfast. Your stomach is too tight. Instead, you drink water and prepare your instruments. The saw must be sharp. The clamps must work smoothly. The cautery irons must be heating. Everything must be perfect, because Lucius's life depends on your skill and his will to survive. Gaius arrives early, his young face grave. He knows what's coming. "Shall I fetch the carpenter?" he asks. You nod. "And 4 more men. He'll fight." They always fight, even the stoic ones. When the saw bites into bone, some primal part of the brain overrides discipline and training. The body fights to stay whole, even when wholeness means death. You go to Lucius's bedside. He's awake, staring at his leg. He already knows. Men always know. "Medicus," he says quietly. "How much time?" You understand the question. If we do this now, you might survive. If we wait, the poison spreads. Another day, perhaps 2. And with the amputation? You won't lie. 1 in 3 die from the surgery itself. Another 1 in 3 die from fever afterward. But 1 in 3 lives. He nods slowly. Better odds than waiting. They bring Lucius to the table. The carpenter and 4 legionaries hold him down, 1 on each limb, 1 across his chest. Lucius doesn't speak. He stares at the tent ceiling, his face set in the rigid mask of a man preparing for agony. You've positioned the amputation point high on the thigh, above the infection. It means removing more leg, but it gives him a better chance. You tie a leather tourniquet tightly around the upper thigh, using a wooden rod to twist it until the blood flow stops. Lucius grunts, but makes no other sound. You pick up the scalpel and make your first circular incision through the skin and muscle, cutting down to the bone. Blood wells from 1,000 tiny vessels. You work quickly, retracting the skin and muscle upward to expose more of the femur. This will create a flap of tissue to eventually cover the bone stump. Ready? You ask the holders. They tighten their grips. You pick up the saw. It's a brutal instrument, a bronze blade with coarse teeth designed to cut through the hardest substance in the human body. You position it against the exposed bone and begin to cut. The sound is indescribable, a grinding, scraping noise that seems to resonate through the tent. Lucius screams, a sound that tears from his throat with such force you fear he'll damage his voice. The men holding him strain against his convulsions. The saw teeth bite deeper with each stroke. You press the iron against the largest artery. The sizzle and smell of burning flesh fills the tent. Lucius's screams reach a new pitch. You hold the iron steady, counting to 5 in your head, ensuring complete cauterization. Then the next vessel, and the next. Smaller ones you tie off with ligatures, your fingers working with practiced speed, despite being slippery with blood. Gaius stands ready with the flap of skin and muscle you created. Together, you pull it down over the bone stump, creating a cushioned end. You suture it in place, though you know these stitches may not hold if infection develops. Still, you must try. The entire procedure has taken less than 20 minutes. It feels like hours. You step back from the table, your arms shaking now that it's over. Lucius has passed out from the pain, which is a mercy. His chest still rises and falls. He lives, for now. Take him back to his bed, you tell the holders. Watch him carefully. If he wakes fevered or the wound bleeds through the bandages, fetch me immediately. They carry him away gently, these hard soldiers rendered tender by witnessing such suffering. You're left standing by the table in a pool of blood, holding instruments that still steam with body heat. You step outside the medical tent. The morning is beautiful, clear sky, gentle breeze, birds singing. The contrast between nature's indifference and human suffering strikes you as obscene. How can the world be so lovely when men are being sawed apart? A messenger finds you there. Medicus, the tribune requests your presence. The tribune, Gaius Marius Jr., son of the famous general. He commands this section of the legion and has never spoken to you directly before. You wonder what he wants, though you're too tired to care much. You follow the messenger to the command tent, aware of your blood-soaked appearance, but having no energy to change. Officers bustle about, planning the next day's movements. They fall silent when you enter, staring at you. You realize you look like death itself. The tribune is a young man, perhaps 30, with the confident bearing of someone born to command. He looks at you with something like awe. The centurion Quintus speaks highly of your skill, he says, and the men say you saved 30 lives yesterday. You want to laugh. 30 lives saved, perhaps, but how many maimed? How many will die slowly over the next week from infections you couldn't prevent? How many will survive but never fight again, never farm again, never live full lives? I did what I could, Tribune. He nods, not understanding. How could he? He fights enemies with swords. Your enemies are invisible. Fever, infection, shock, blood loss. His battles end. Yours continue long after the fighting stops. Marcus stands in the command tent, looking utterly out of place among clean, armoured officers. His tunic is saturated with blood, still wet in places. His face bears dried blood in spatter patterns. His hands hang at his sides, too tired to move, blood caked under his fingernails. His posture is slumped, exhausted. His eyes are hollow, barely focusing on the tribune. He looks like a man who has been through multiple battles rather than surgery. The contrast between his appearance and the pristine officers is stark. Marcus follows the messenger mechanically, his steps dragging. He enters the command tent without ceremony, not bothering to stand at attention. He looks at the tribune with dull, unresponsive eyes when addressed. He gives a minimal nod of acknowledgement to the praise. His response is flat, emotionless. He stands without military bearing, too exhausted for proper protocol. When dismissed, he turns and leaves without salute or formality, simply walking out as if in a daze. You return to find Gaius cleaning the amputation table. He's only 16, but he's already developing the hollow look that comes from seeing too much death too young. He works methodically, scrubbing blood from wood that will never truly be clean. "How is Lucius?" you ask. Still unconscious, breathing steady, no bleeding through the bandages yet. Yet. That word carries so much weight. Yet means it's coming. Yet means this brief respite is temporary. You check the other patients. Felix, the boy with amputated fingers, is awake and staring at his bandaged hand. He looks up when you approach, and you see the question in his eyes. What kind of man will I be now? You want to tell him he'll adapt, that many men live full lives with fewer than 10 fingers. You want to tell him the missing fingers won't define him, but you're too tired for false comfort. The pain will lessen in a few days, you say instead. It's the only comfort you can honestly offer. A commotion outside, more wounded arriving. The battle continues, apparently. It always continues. Rome is always expanding, always fighting, always needing battlefield surgeons to patch up the consequences of its ambition. You wash your hands again, though they'll be bloody within minutes. You pick up clean instruments. You prepare your mind for more screams, more desperate attempts to preserve life in men who came here to deal death. This is your existence. This is what you chose when you inherited your father's medical case. The new wounded are different. These aren't combat injuries. They're from a collapsed siege tower. Crushed bones, internal injuries, trauma you can see but can't fix. You do what you can, which often means simply making men comfortable while they die. One soldier has been crushed across the chest. He struggles to breathe, each inhalation a wet, rattling sound. You know the signs. Ribs driven into lungs, internal bleeding. There's nothing to be done. No surgery will fix this. You give him wine mixed with poppy tears, the closest thing you have to pain relief. It's expensive, rare, reserved for the dying. He drinks it gratefully, and within minutes, his breathing eases. The pain leaves his face. He even smiles slightly. "My wife," he whispers, "in Campania. Tell her." You lean close. "I'll tell her you died bravely." He nods, satisfied with the lie. Within the hour, he's gone, slipping away while you're treating another patient. You cover his face with linen and move on. There's no time for mourning. The living demand your attention. By midday, you've lost 3 patients. 2 from the siege tower accident, 1 from a wound infection that overwhelmed his body. Their bodies are carried out to the camp's burial detail. Tomorrow, they'll be cremated with military honors. Their ashes will be sent home to families who'll never truly understand how they died. You make a mental note to write to the wife in Campania. It's not required of you, but you'll do it anyway. She deserves to know her husband's last thoughts were of her. Evening brings a different visitor to your tent, a priest of Asclepius, the healing god. He's an old man with a long white beard, carrying a staff entwined with a serpent. He wears robes that have somehow remained pristine despite the camp's mud and blood. "Medicus," he greets you formally, "I have come to bless your work and offer prayers for your patients." You want to tell him that prayers won't stop infections, that the gods seem notably absent from your tent. But you're too tired to argue theology, and some patients find comfort in ritual. "You're welcome, priest." He moves through the tent, chanting in ancient Greek, making gestures over each wounded man. Some patients close their eyes in prayer. Others ignore him, too deep in their own pain. You notice he avoids touching anyone, avoiding blood contamination. Easy to stay clean when you don't do the actual work. When he reaches Lucius, he pauses. The veteran's fever has spiked again, despite the amputation. His face is flushed, his breathing rapid. The priest looks at you questioningly. The poison was already in his blood, you explain quietly. Sometimes removing the source isn't enough. The priest nods gravely and offers an extended prayer over Lucius. You don't have the heart to tell him it's probably useless. Who knows? Perhaps the gods do listen to their priests, even if they ignore battlefield surgeons. After the priest leaves, you check Lucius's stump. The bandages are soaked with fluid, not blood, but the thin, foul-smelling discharge of infection. Your heart sinks. You sleep in the medical tent tonight, unwilling to leave your patients. The nights are when men die most often. Something about darkness weakens the will to live. You sit against a tent pole, dozing fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Around midnight, Lucius begins to convulse. You're at his side immediately. His fever is extreme. You can feel the heat radiating from his skin before you even touch him. His eyes are open but unseeing, rolled back in his head. Foam flecks his lips. "Gaius!" you shout. Your assistant appears, tousled and frightened. "Cold water, all we have." You begin stripping away Lucius's blankets, despite his violent shaking. Fever this high can cook the brain itself. You've seen it. Men who survive infections but are never quite right again. Their thoughts scattered, their memories gone. Gaius returns with buckets of cold water drawn from the river. Together, you soak linens and drape them over Lucius's burning body. He thrashes weakly against the cold, but you hold him down. This is mercy, even if it feels like torture. For an hour, you work, constantly refreshing the cold compresses as they warm from contact with his skin. Slowly, gradually, the convulsions ease. His fever breaks, sweat pouring from him in streams. His eyes close, and he slips into something that looks more like sleep than unconsciousness. You sit back, exhausted. You've bought him time, maybe a day, maybe just hours. But every moment of life is a small victory against the darkness that wants to claim all your patience. 21 to 23. Morning finds you still sitting beside Lucius. He's alive, sleeping deeply, his fever reduced, though not gone. It's more than you expected. Sometimes, very rarely, a man's will to live overpowers infection. Lucius has that will, but the victory is small and temporary. 2 other patients have developed fevers overnight. The infections are spreading through your tent like an invisible plague. You know why. The same instruments used on one patient touch the next. The same hands that close one wound open another. You wash in wine and water, but it's never enough. The ancient texts don't explain this. They speak of miasmas, bad air, imbalanced humours, but you've noticed patterns. Wounds cleaned with wine fester less often. Instruments heated in flame seem to cause less infection. But you don't know why, and without understanding, you can't consistently prevent it. You make your morning rounds with growing dread. Yesterday's amputation, Felix, shows no signs of fever. The fingers are healing cleanly, but the centurion's rib wound is hot and swollen. The arrow wound in Caius's shoulder is draining pus. You clean, you pack with wine-soaked lint, you pray. It's all you can do. A messenger arrives. Medicus, the Tribune requests that you accompany the Legion on tomorrow's march. We're moving to establish a new fort deeper in Germanic territory. You nod numbly. More marching, more fighting, more wounded. The cycle never ends. Rome's borders expand, and you expand with them, carrying your case of blood-stained instruments into each new territory. Preparing to march means organizing your medical supplies into portable form. You have 2 pack mules assigned to carry your equipment, your instruments, bandages, wine, herbs, and the tent itself. Everything must be carefully packed to prevent damage during transport. You work methodically, wrapping bronze instruments in oiled leather, packing amphorae of wine in straw-lined crates. Gaius helps, learning the proper way to preserve medical supplies on campaign. This is knowledge his father never taught him: how to prepare for healing while marching toward violence. The wounded who can walk will march with the Legion. Those who can't will be left here with a skeleton crew to guard the camp until they either recover or die. It's brutal calculus, but necessary. The Legion cannot slow its pace for broken men. Lucius can't walk. His fever has returned, though less severely than last night. You make the decision that will haunt you. He stays, you tell the officer coordinating the camp's garrison. Lucius is conscious enough to understand. He grips your arm with surprising strength. Medicus, thank you for trying. You can't speak. You just nod and turn away, blinking hard. You've lost patients before, hundreds of them, but Lucius fought so hard to survive. And you're leaving him anyway, marching away to create new casualties while the old ones die behind you. This is the part of military medicine that breaks you slowly. Not the blood, not the screams, but the impossible choices. The knowledge that you can't save everyone, that strategy and logistics sometimes matter more than individual lives. The Legion marches at dawn, 15,000 men moving in organized columns, a great serpent of bronze and leather winding through the forest. You march with the non-combatants in the center, protected by ranks of armed legionaries front and rear. The Germanic forest is unlike anything in Italia. Ancient trees block out the sun, creating a perpetual twilight. The paths are narrow, forcing the column into long, vulnerable lines. You can feel the tension in the soldiers. Every shadow might hide an enemy. Every sound might herald attack. You walk alongside your pack mules, one hand on your medical case, feeling its familiar weight. Inside are the instruments that define your life. The scalpels that cut, the saw that amputates, the forceps that extract. They're extensions of your hands now, more familiar than any weapon. Gaius walks beside you, his young face alert and nervous. This is his first major march into hostile territory. You remember your first march, the fear, the uncertainty, the constant readiness for violence. Now you barely notice it. The danger has become routine. Medicus, Gaius asks quietly, how many campaigns have you served? You have to think. The years blur together into one long sequence of battles and wounded. 7, you finally answer. 7 summers of war. And you're only 23. You nod. You started young, inheriting your father's position at 16. 7 years of blood. 7 years of screams. 7 years of watching men die despite your best efforts. It feels like a lifetime. It feels like no time at all. The ambush comes at midday. One moment the forest is quiet, except for the tramp of thousands of feet. The next, the air fills with Germanic war cries and the whistle of thrown spears. The Legion responds with trained precision. The marching column transforms instantly into defensive formation, shields locking together, creating a mobile fortress. You drop to a crouch, using the mules for cover, your heart hammering. This is when you're most useless. During actual combat, you can only wait. Listen to the sounds of men dying, knowing that soon they'll be carried to you, and it will be your turn to fight death. The battle is brief but vicious. Germanic tribesmen attack from the forest cover, trying to break the column, but Roman discipline holds. Within 20 minutes, it's over. The attackers melt back into the forest, leaving their dead behind. The casualties are brought to you immediately. No time to set up the medical tent. You work here on the forest path, using a flat rock as your operating surface. The first man has a spear through his abdomen. You know immediately he's dying. The weapon has punctured intestines. Infection is inevitable, death certain. But you try anyway. You always try. You remove the spear, he screams and passes out, and pack the wound with wine-soaked lint. It's futile, but doing nothing is worse. The second man has a shattered arm from a club strike. This you can work with. You splint the arm using wood from the forest, binding it tightly. The legion doesn't stop marching. The wounded who can walk are helped by their comrades. Those who can't are carried on improvised stretchers. You walk among them, doing what you can while moving, which isn't much. The man with the abdominal wound dies before we make camp. You'd expected it, but the inevitability doesn't make it easier. His body is left beside the path with a marker. The Legion will send a detail back to recover him for proper cremation. Maybe, if time allows. If the Germanic tribes don't find him first. By evening, you've lost 3 patients from the ambush and treated 12 others. Your hands are cramping from working while walking. Your knees scraped raw from kneeling on forest ground. When the Legion finally stops to make camp, you're given a space to set up your medical tent. It takes an hour to erect it properly, stake the lines, arrange your supplies. By the time you're finished, night has fallen. More wounded arrive, not from combat, but from the march itself. Sprained ankles, blistered feet, a dislocated shoulder from carrying heavy equipment. These are the mundane injuries that rarely kill, but constantly demand attention. You treat them all, wrapping ankles, lancing blisters, manipulating the shoulder joint back into place with a p. Gaius works beside you, learning. He's pale from seeing his first real combat, but his hands are steady. Good. He'll need that steadiness. Everyone does. You work until midnight, then collapse on your sleeping mat without even removing your sandals. Sleep comes instantly, heavy and dreamless. You dream of your father. He's teaching you to suture, guiding your hands on a practice pad made of pigskin. His voice is patient, encouraging. Steady, Marcus. Each stitch must be perfect. A man's life depends on your precision. You wake with that voice still echoing in your mind. Your father died of camp fever when you were 19, after teaching you everything he knew. Sometimes you wonder if he'd be proud of your work. Other times, you wonder if he'd be horrified by how many men you've watched die. Dawn brings new wounded, not from battle, but from camp accidents. A soldier burned while tending the cook fire, another with a deep cut from a broken amphora. These injuries seem almost trivial after battlefield trauma, but they still demand treatment. The burned man is your greater concern. The wound covers his entire forearm, the skin already blistering. You've seen burns like this become infected within days. You apply a salve of honey and herbs, wrapping it loosely to allow drainage. Keep it clean, you instruct. If the blisters break, come to me immediately. He nods, already knowing he might lose the arm if infection sets in. Everyone knows. Death from infection is so common, it's simply accepted as part of military life. A dispatch rider arrives with news. The new fort's location has been identified. We'll reach it in 3 days' march. 3 more days of vulnerability in hostile territory. 3 more days of potential ambush. You check your supplies. Wine is running low. Bandages are adequate. You have perhaps 30 more arrows you can extract before your forceps will need replacing. The 2nd day's march is uneventful, which makes everyone nervous. The forest feels too quiet, like it's holding its breath. The soldiers march with weapons ready, eyes constantly scanning the tree line. You use the relative peace to teach Gaius more about wound care. As you walk, you quiz him on treatments, making him recite from memory the procedures for different injuries. Arrow to the shoulder, you ask. Assess the angle of entry. Remove by pushing through if the head has barbs. Pack with wine-soaked lint. Watch for fever indicating damaged vessels. Good. Crushed hand? Remove unsalvageable digits. Cauterize. Splint remaining fingers. Monitor for infection spreading up the arm. He's learning well, better than you did at his age. You had to learn mostly through trial and error. Your father too busy treating patients to teach properly. Gaius has the luxury of your experience, paid for in the lives of hundreds of men who died while you learned. At midday, you pass through a cleared area where a battle was fought weeks ago. Skeletal remains still litter the ground, both Roman and Germanic. The bones have been picked clean by scavengers. Armor and weapons lie scattered, already rusting. The soldiers march past without comment. Death is so commonplace that a battlefield full of bones draws no reaction. You notice Gaius staring, though. First time seeing old battlefield? You ask. He nods mutely. Get used to it. The land is full of them. Rome is built on bones. The evening of the second day, a soldier comes to you with an unusual request. He's healthy, uninjured, but clearly troubled. Medicus, I need to speak with you privately. You step away from the medical tent with him. He's young, perhaps 20, with the hardened look of multiple campaigns. I can't sleep, he confesses. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of men I've killed. Germans mostly. But in my dreams, they keep fighting even after they're dead. I wake up screaming. My tent mates are complaining. You've heard this before. Some soldiers develop this affliction. Dreams that won't stop. Fears that won't fade. The Greeks called it battle madness, though it's more like battle exhaustion, the soul wearing thin from too much killing. How long has this been happening? 3 months, since the campaign in Noricum. You have no real treatment for this. Your medicines work on bodies, not minds. But you offer what you can. A mixture of herbs that promotes sleep, though you warn him it's not a cure. The dreams come from what you've done, you tell him honestly. The only cure is to stop doing it. But we're soldiers of Rome. Stopping isn't an option. He takes the herbs gratefully, though you both know they won't solve his problem. Some wounds don't show on the outside. Some wounds never heal. After he leaves, you sit alone for a moment, wondering about your own dreams. How long before your sleep is haunted not by your father's voice, but by the screams of all the men you couldn't save? The third day brings you to the site of the new fort. It's a hill overlooking a river valley, strategically sound, easily defended. Engineers immediately begin surveying, marking where walls will rise, where gates will stand. The Legion makes camp while construction begins. You establish your medical tent in the usual position, central location, easily accessible from all quarters. The tent goes up smoother now, Gaius learning the proper way to stake lines and arrange supports. Before the first wall is erected, you have your first patient, a carpenter who struck his thumb with his hammer while shaping timber. The nail is crushed, already turning black beneath the skin. You heat a fine needle in flame and pierce the nail, releasing the blood pooled beneath. The relief on his face is immediate. Small injuries, you tell Gaius as you work. These seem trivial, but ignore them and they become serious. Crushed nails become infected. Splinters become abscesses. A surgeon treats everything, not just battlefield trauma. As days pass, the fort rises around you. Walls of timber and earth grow higher daily. Watchtowers emerge at corners. A permanent structure begins to replace temporary tents. And the wounded keep coming. A soldier breaks his leg falling from scaffolding. Another develops an abscess from an old wound that never healed properly. A case of camp fever starts spreading through one cohort. You treat them all. maintaining the endless vigil against death and injury. This is your war, not against Germanic tribes, but against the fragility of human flesh. A month into the fort's construction, you face an outbreak of dysentery. It starts with one soldier, then spreads to 5, then 20. The latrine trenches are too close to the water source, a basic mistake that you point out to the Tribune. We need to move the latrines downstream and dig new wells upstream, you insist. He's resistant. Moving latrines means extra work for already exhausted men. But when the count of 6 soldiers reaches 40, he relents. Dysentery is different from battle wounds. You can't cut it out or cauterize it. You can only try to keep men hydrated while their bodies purge the infection. You prepare boiled water mixed with salt and honey, forcing 6 soldiers to drink even when they're vomiting it back up. Gaius becomes sick on the 5th day of the outbreak. Your young assistant, always healthy, suddenly develops the telltale cramping and bloody flux. Fear grips you, not for the medical challenge, but for the boy himself. You've grown fond of him, perhaps seeing in him the son you'll never have time to father. You treat him as you treat all the others, but you watch him more carefully. You sit with him through the worst of it, holding the bowl when he vomits, wiping his face with cool cloths. "Am I dying, Medicus?" he asks weakly. "No," you say firmly. "You're young." The outbreak peaks on the 7th day. 3 soldiers die despite your efforts, their bodies too weakened to fight the infection. You perform the grim duty of certifying their deaths, closing their eyes, preparing them for cremation. But Gaius survives. On the 8th day, he keeps down water. On the 9th, he asks for food. On the 10th, he's sitting up, weak but clearly recovering. The relief you feel is overwhelming, more intense than any emotion you've allowed yourself in years. "You're a terrible patient," you tell him with a slight smile, complaining constantly. He grins weakly. "I learned from watching you work. You complain about every patient." It's not true, but it makes you laugh, a sound so rare that it startles you both. As the outbreak subsides, you enforce new sanitation rules throughout the fort. Latrines are moved, wells are dug in new locations. Soldiers are required to wash hands before eating. The officers grumble about the extra work, but the sick count drops to 0 within 2 weeks. You've won this battle, not with scalpel or saw, but with boiled water and common sense. Sometimes the greatest victories come from prevention rather than cure. The fort is nearly complete now. Permanent barracks replace tents. A proper headquarters building stands at the center, and your medical station, no longer a tent but a wooden structure with multiple rooms, occupies a prominent position. You're settling in. This place will be your home for the foreseeable future, another outpost in Rome's endless expansion. Winter arrives. The Rhine freezes, and with it comes a new set of medical challenges. Frostbite becomes your most common patient, soldiers on watch duty losing fingers and toes to the brutal cold. You treat them as best you can, warming frozen flesh gradually, amputating what cannot be saved. The amputations are cleaner now, your technique refined by years of practice. The men still scream, but your hands no longer shake. A veteran centurion loses 3 toes to frostbite. You remove them efficiently, cauterize, and bind the foot. He takes it stoically, as veterans do. "Will I march again, Medicus?" "With a cane, perhaps. You'll never run." He nods, accepting another wound in Rome's service. How many pieces of themselves do these men leave scattered across the empire? How many return home whole? Winter also brings respite from combat. The Germanic tribes don't attack in deep snow. The fort settles into routine, maintenance, training, guard duty. Your work becomes more predictable. Injuries from training accidents, illnesses from close quarters. the occasional fight between soldiers. You use the quiet time to teach Gaius advanced techniques. He's ready to perform simple surgeries himself. You guide his hands as your father once guided yours, teaching him to suture, to debride wounds, to amputate when necessary. You have the gift, you tell him one evening, after he successfully removes an arrow from a training injury. Steady hands and strong stomach. You'll be a good surgeon. He beams at the praise. It reminds you why you do this, not for glory or recognition, but to pass on knowledge, to ensure that when you eventually fall, someone else can continue the work. Spring brings renewed fighting. The Germanic tribes, restless from winter confinement, launch raids against the fort. The attacks are probing actions, testing Roman defences, but they produce casualties nonetheless. You're treating more arrow wounds now, as the Germans favour bows for harassment attacks. Each arrow extraction is a puzzle, reading the angle, understanding where the point sits, removing it without causing more damage than it already has. A young soldier, barely 18, takes an arrow through his thigh. The iron point is lodged against the bone. You can feel it scraping as you probe with your forceps, trying to grip it firmly enough to pull without it slipping. This will hurt, you warn unnecessarily. You pull. The arrow resists, caught on bone. You pull harder. It comes free suddenly, and blood wells from the wound. You pack it quickly, checking for signs of arterial damage. The blood flow is steady but not pulsing. Good. He'll keep the leg. But as weeks pass, the raids intensify. More wounded arrive daily. Your medical building begins to overflow. You requisition more beds, more bandages, more wine. Gaius works alongside you now as a full partner rather than assistant. He performs surgeries independently while you handle more complex cases. The student has become colleague. Pride mixes with sadness. He's growing up in this crucible of blood, losing his youth to war just as you did. One evening, exhausted from a day of treating raid casualties, you sit together sharing wine. Do you regret this path? You ask him. He considers. No. Where else could I make such difference? Every life saved is a victory against death itself. You recognize your father's words in his mouth, passed down through you. The chain continues. Summer brings the major campaign. The legion marches out in force, leaving only a garrison to hold the fort. You march with them, of course, carrying your instruments toward another battlefield. The Germanic coalition has gathered in unprecedented numbers. Thousands of warriors assembled to drive Rome back across the Rhine. The coming battle will be massive, decisive. You establish your medical station behind the Roman lines. Multiple tables this time, anticipating heavy casualties. Gaius commands one table, you take the other. You've requisitioned additional helpers from the camp followers, women and old men who can at least hold down patients and carry supplies. The battle begins at dawn. You hear it before you see it. The crash of shield walls meeting, the screams of wounded, the roar of thousands of voices raised in combat. The noise is overwhelming, inhuman. The wounded begin arriving within minutes. Not the careful triage of small skirmishes. This is a flood. Men with horrific injuries, crushed by clubs, sliced by swords, pierced by spears. You work in a blur, moving from patient to patient, doing what you can, making impossible choices about who to treat first. A soldier with his intestines spilling from his abdomen. Nothing you can do. Wine for pain, a cloth for dignity, move on. An arrow through the lung. Extract it, pack the wound, hope. Next patient, a crushed skull. Already dead, still breathing. Next patient, a severed arm, the limb gone, but the man alive. Tourniquet, cauterize, next patient. Hours blend together in a nightmare of blood and screams. You don't think, you just work, letting training guide your hands while your mind retreats somewhere distant, somewhere safe. The battle lasts all day. By evening, when the Germanic coalition finally breaks and retreats, you've treated over 100 men. Your medical station looks like a slaughterhouse. Blood pools on the ground, soaks into the earth. Discarded limbs lie in piles. The smell is indescribable. You've lost count of how many died under your hands. 30? 40? The numbers blur with the faces. But you've saved perhaps 60. 60 men who will see their families again, even if some return missing pieces. As darkness falls and the flow of casualties finally stops, you sit down for the first time in 12 hours. Your legs nearly give out. Gaius collapses beside you, his young face aged by what he's witnessed. "We did it," he whispers. "We saved them." You want to feel triumph, but you're too exhausted. You just nod. You notice your hands are shaking, not from fear or strain, but from pure physical exhaustion. These hands have cut, sutured, cauterized, amputated. They've held beating hearts, clamped spurting arteries, pieced together shattered bones. A tribune approaches, the same Gaius Marius Jr. from months ago. He looks at your medical station with something like awe. "Medicus, Rome honors your service. You've saved more lives today than any soldier on this field." You're too tired to respond properly. You just nod again. He leaves and you sit in silence, watching the sun set over a field of the dead and dying. 7 years of this. 7 years of blood and screams and impossible choices. But somewhere, 60 men are alive who shouldn't be. Somewhere, families will be spared grief. It's not glory, it's not clean, but it's something. You stand, your work not yet done. The wounded need checking through the night. The fight against death never truly ends. But for now, in this moment, sitting in the gathering darkness, you allow yourself to feel what you've accomplished. You've survived another battle. So have they. Tomorrow, the struggle continues. Tonight, that's enough. And so, you've witnessed what they never taught you in history class. The reality of ancient medicine. The battlefield surgeons who worked without anesthesia, without understanding of infection, without the tools we take for granted. Marcus and thousands like him saved what lives they could, working in conditions we can barely imagine. Their hands, guided only by experience and desperate hope, held back death for another day. Now, as you drift towards sleep in your comfortable bed, with modern medicine just a phone call away, be grateful. Be grateful for antibiotics, for anesthesia, for the incredible advances that separate our world from theirs. Rest well, you've earned it. Tomorrow brings another story, another journey to a time that was. Until then, dim those lights, close your eyes, and sleep.